All right, so we're gonna get into we're gonna away from the Star Wars conversation. I'm gonna start with my pick. I say
that was awesome.
Man. That was
awesome.
That was really good. So I chose Heathers, and as a movie buff, like Andy, I think you can relate to this as well. Like, there's these movies from our childhood that we remember, and this is one of those films that was very important to me, and I think it's the reason why, like, I don't really like John Hughes Brat Pack movies. I think this is why, because I saw Heathers first, and Heathers to me did the high school thing a lot better. It was very dark. It was very funny. One of the greatest lines is "fuck me gently with a chainsaw." So I mean, there's so many great things from this movie. It led to stuff like Mean Girls and Easy A. Like, we have those movies because of Heathers, and I think. Hold on. JT was holding up a chainsaw for those that can't see, obviously. So it was one of those movies that made me realize that movies can be dark and weird, and that I would like them. And like it just, every time I watch it too, I get something new out of it. And it's how Christian Slater has been a huge part of my movie watching life for a long time. When you go from this to True Romance, Pump Up the Volume, Legend of Billie Jean, just all these movies that I watched that he's in. And Heathers, I think, was the start of that. Heathers was like, oh my God, like, this guy is awesome. Yes, he's doing a Jack Nicholson impression. I will acknowledge that, but it's a great Jack Nicholson impression. JD is a great villain in this film. There's so many in this movie. There are so many things that work for today. Like, it was a very progressive movie for 1989. And I think that's why it still holds up. And I brought up Mean Girls. The the director of Mean Girls is actually the brother of the guy that wrote Heathers. So I thought that was an interesting tie in there. And that Mean Girls is most compared to Heathers when it came out, at least it was. And it being the PG-13 version of Heathers, because Heathers is rated R. So if you're, obviously I saw it when I was like 12. So I probably shouldn't have. I had a friend who I'd go to his house and we'd go to the basement and he's like, hey, I got this movie, you want to watch it? And we watched Warriors, we watched Heathers, just a bunch of like random movies that I would probably not have seen on my own.
I thought there was going to be a porn reference there as well.
Oh, there's no porn. No, we did not go down and watch porn in the basement.
Well, you should high five that guy or send him like a cookie arrangement for.
Yeah, I should.
Great movie.
Reminds me of that Simpsons joke where they're all like, we're going to go see an R-rated movie called Barton Fink. Barton Fink. Barton. It's like, these kids are not going to get that movie.
That is a great joke. Yeah, so, I mean, just to me, it's just been one of those films I've always gone back to. It's not horror, but it goes into that area, which you guys know I'm a big horror fan. So it kind of fits all the genres. It's dramatic. It's funny. It's horrific at times. It's got a crazy fucking ending, and Winona Ryder is such a badass in this movie as the main character. So it's just always stuck with me. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I don't know who wants to go first. Andy, we'll go with you first.
Sure. I mean, it's peak Winona. Beetlejuice. Same era. Edward Scissorhands a little bit after. And
we know why Joyce in Stranger Things went nuts.
Yeah. I think, you mentioned the ending. That's the first thing that I recall. I watched it much later. I wasn't 12 when I watched it. I was probably closer to, I watched it probably maybe even after I saw Mean Girls. I know. I'll shield my head. But the ending is just absolutely bonkers. Like, that would never be in a major motion picture these days for violence in schools.
Well, especially in school. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that slips in kind of an indie movie. But I think that to your point earlier, Kirky, you always hear, oh, it's like Heathers. Like, every movie that comes out that has some sort of like demented, twisted high school storyline, it's always, this is reminiscent of Heathers. And that's the true hallmark of, a transcendent film, ultimately. But so many memorable lines in it. Yeah. I think you also mentioned kind of like why it was important to you, and I'll hit on that when I hit mine as well. But like that, hey, I kind of like kind of fucked up stuff.
Yep.
You know, like, and that's kind of a whoa moment in a sense when it typically there's like the normal fare that everybody likes, and then I think we got a collection of those folks on this call. But
of course, well, and I can tell you right now that it is the reason I was probably one of the few people in the theaters watching Very Bad Things, laughing my ass off because I thought it was fucking hilarious, where everybody else was like, wow, this is just really fucking weird and dumb. And I'm like, that movie, and again, Christian Slater, of course, but like that, you know, it is the beginning for me to those type of films. And so I was thinking about this before. It's definitely one of my favorite movies. I don't know if you guys can see, I've got a Heather's, it came with like a ruler. It's like a school, like a pencil holder, basically DVD version of the movie.
Love it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those movies that it's just always stuck with me. Bus, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say that was really an introduction to Christian Slater for me and Winona Ryder. And it was funny because always in the back of my head watching that, I was like, who's he remind me of? Who's he remind me of? And it's like, he's Jack Nicholson, right? Yep. Right? I mean, he is. But, and then after watching that film, I mean, because there's like murder, right? And there's a lot of, and I was like, I shouldn't enjoy this as much as I am. And they're kind of taking especially if you're in high school when you watched it, because think of everything that it covers. And it's it's dark. And I did read up on, not at the time, but afterwards, they were trying to get Stanley Kubrick. They wanted him because of Dr. Strangelove to direct Heathers, which that
would have been insane.
That could have been insane, but could have been. I don't think it could be any.
It would have been different.
It would be different. But also, you guys were saying like Mean Girls, but how about Virgin Suicides? I mean, didn't that have a little flavor of Heathers?
A little bit more the dramatic side to it? Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, like the heavier stuff, but kind of like it, kind of that stuff out of left field too, a little bit, right? So
I think so, and that's a great movie too. And I think that's just it. Like Andy said, that's how you have something that's a great movie or something that stand the test of time. Is so many other movies are like that movie, and
steal a little piece and part of it, or
right,
or borrow. Is it really creativity?
Yeah, borrow. And I want to believe that Waters, the director of Mean Girls, was like read the script from Tina Fey and was like, "This sounds like my brother's movie. I totally have to do this now," because it was totally like. They stole the idea. You have the three hot, girls that run the school. Less murder, of course. But it just to see people like, and it was fun to me too because I worked at Blockbuster when Mean Girls came out, so it was fun to be like, have people I work with be like, "Oh, Mean Girls is great." I'm like, "Oh, you saw Mean Girls? You need to fucking watch Heathers then," and just introduce that movie to newer people. I think, and it was always very fun to do. I like having movies that there are movies that I'm like, this is going to be a movie I'm going to show to people, and you got to show it to the right person because then the other person may not talk to you again.
But then they're like, Kirky's a little weird, man. I watched that.
Oh, dude. Andy and I, we talked about this last time when his wife will walk into the room like, you chose to watch this movie? Like, this was your choice?
On purpose. You watched this on purpose?
Yep.
Yeah.
I was watching the 90s horror comedy Popcorn in the room. We had COVID a couple weeks ago, so I put it on. Rebecca walks in. She's like, what the fuck is this? And then like she actually got angry. She's like, why do you always watch weird shit? I come in and you're watching weird shit. And I'm like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, cuz. So I will say
it's not Human Centipede level, but it's
she
it's
watched.
Weird.
She watched it, and she's want to watch it because she knows that bodily function stuff grosses me out. I'm like, I'll never.
But I'm just saying, it's like I think Andy, you just reviewed something, and Andy said I'm also the guy that watches the weird stuff, and he said it earlier, and it's like,
yes,
I don't seek it out, but I don't turn it down. Like I don't consciously go like that's got to be the weirdest movie ever. I have to see it.
I think Bus, I think you're a lightning rod for it.
I may be.
I think it seeks you out.
Because I've seen some really weird stuff, and I was like, I don't know if I could recommend that to anybody. I really don't know.
And I'll tell you right now, there's some movies I own that are weird and strange that I own just so that one day I could be like, here, watch this.
Yeah.
Like, go and like, I don't know who I'm going to do that to, but there's definitely some other. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, really quick. I just wanted to put Crimes of the Future on Bus's to-do list after hearing that.
Watch it.
I mean,
watch
absolutely.
it.
I feel like we might get taken away if we admit we like it. For real.
There's a good reason that I watched that when my wife was out of town, because I didn't want her judging me as she does. This week for me has been weird movie week because I'm like, I'm going to watch the stuff I know that she's going to hate and judge me for. So that was one of those.
If you've seen Videodrome, if you've seen Existence, you know what you're getting.
I don't think you like Spider that much.
I didn't really like Spider.
Spider's another one though. It's very weird and strange, ancestral. Wayne, do you have any thoughts on Heathers? I know you've been kind of quiet here.
It was just nice to see like an 80s high school comedy, or I'm sorry, an 80s
comedy,
not comedy. I misspoke. Excuse me. Film just that isn't like the normal cookie cutter, like jocks, nerds, preps, that. So I appreciated that.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of fucked up, and it's cool.
Yeah. 100% fucked up.
It's the best way I could put it.
I do want to say another thing too. When you guys were talking about Winona, in my mind, Heathers is the movie that made her. But in reality, that's not true because Heathers didn't make that much money at the box office. It's what made her in my head. Like when I saw Heathers, it was probably the first time I think I'd seen anything with her. And I'm like, oh, well, this is who she's going to be from now on in my brain. And then to find out, it was like Edward Scissorhands was like her first, or Beetlejuice. I think that was first. Beetlejuice was the movie that really put her on the map. Came out the same year as Heathers, or the year after, or right around that time. But Heathers was a very small kind of indie, low budget film from back in 1989. So,
good.
But to me, it was like that's what, to me, it stuck out as both their movies. Where I'm like, that's where I know them from. And I realized as I got older that a lot of people didn't, or discovered them elsewhere. JT, any thoughts on Heathers that you would like to say before we move on to Andy's movie?
Confession time. I never saw the whole thing.
Whoa!
It was one of those movies. It was one of those movies that people would put on like in the background or whatever. So like, I'm gonna have to give it another look. See.
I'm gonna put the button on this part of the episode and say JT needs to go watch Heathers like immediately. It's only like an hour and a half.
JT, you'll like it. You really will like it.
Yeah, I'll put it on top of the list for sure.
It's always streaming somewhere.
You're gonna like it better than Requiem for a Dream. That's a little
I don't know. There's little gaps in my cult classic.
Same here. So there's movies that I still haven't watched. I'm trying and that's why, like, if you guys have been paying attention to me, I'm doing old movies now. Like, trying to do one old movie a week, so I can. I don't know. Culture isn't the right word, but just there's so much shit I haven't seen, and I feel like people, because I'm a movie person, they'll judge me if they know. So it's like I'm trying to go through and watch them all so I can get it out of the way.
Kirky, when you guys were talking mob movies, you and Wayne, and I think I'd sidebarred with you, but not you, Wayne. You could cut this out. Once Upon a Time in America is one of the most impactful, I think, ones that people don't see. That's a mob movie.
Yeah,
and again, people talk about The Godfather and Soprano. They talk about all these things, and they miss Once Upon a Time in America. I don't.
It's 2 cassettes.
Yeah, it's long.
Yeah, it is.
I had it on VHS, and it's like end of tape 1, put in tape 2. I mean, it was a long, and I mean, they're taping at like 120 speed. I mean, it was a long movie, but so well done. But to your point, sometimes you're going to miss one of these classics. And I think Heathers is one that if you haven't seen, and just knowing this room here we're in, everybody will have an appreciation for it. At least appreciate something about it. Yeah. But I could also recommend it to, say, like my brother-in-law, and not think that he thinks I'm weirder than I already am. You know what I mean? Like, it rides a fine line there. And they'll be like, oh, there's famous people in it, so they'll watch it,
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, to put it, just the last thing I'll say is it's a very entertaining film. It's dark. It is funny at times. It's not, I wouldn't call it a comedy necessarily, but it is just one of those movies that I think hits for me, everything that I want in a film. And I was thinking about this earlier, you know, there's always a difference between best film and favorite film. Would I say Heathers is one of the best movies ever made? No. But for me, in my own personal life, it's one of my top 5 favorite movies that I've watched. Mm-hmm. And that's always going to be true to me. So that's how important this movie is. That's why I wanted to talk about this one today, because I was going to go something weird, but when Andy picked his movie, I was like, you know what? I know why Andy picked his movie, and I'm going to go pick a movie similar that speaks to me in a similar way. And that will be the segue into Andy. Will you introduce your film, please?
Yeah, sure. Which, by the way, the Night of the Living Dead remake, which is what I'm going to talk about, that clocks in at 88 minutes. So real short, the zombie splatter fest.
Fast watch.
Yeah. I got some notes because I'm professional here.
Love it.
But I still recall watching this. I think it was on the Joe Bob Briggs show, Kirky, who I know you're a big fan of.
Yep.
You know, when he had that thing on the show on TNT.
The Monster Vision.
Yeah, and I caught it. I was hanging out with a friend. This is probably when I'm 17. I would want to say it's late 90s. And I came in a few minutes in where they're at, the first undead person is kind of staggering towards Barbara, you know, and I'm just like, what is this movie? To kind of echo a little bit you said, Kirky, but flip it a little bit. Not one of my favorite movies. I'm not sure it's one of my favorite 100 movies, but it just had a big impact because it kind of led me down a road of more horror, more uncomfortable, more cynical films, I'd say too. You know, I mean, this is super negative about humanity. I mean, I know it's a zombie movie, but spoiler alert, they're almost always, if they're done well, about how humans treat other humans.
Yes.
And it was right on the cusp of the I guess the second wave of zombie films with, the Dawn of the Dead remake, etc. So, and I just remember going to Blockbuster very frequently after and trying to find the most fucking weird thing from in the horror section, from the early 80s, and that's when it started, that kind of passion for weird stuff, and why I think Kirky, you and I kind of bond over a lot of those really weird ones that no one else would see. But and then I actually started, probably because of this movie and watching that, making my own movies with my friends, with a camcorder too, and making a zombie movie, of course.
Again to the porn. What the hell?
Laundry Pile Productions.
Laundry Pile.
Stiff Sock Productions.
Did we all do that? Hey, we're all on TV. Did we all do that growing up? We made our own movies with our friends and stuff.
I had a Super 8 camera, so I was old school.
I had a shoulder strap VHS with from 1982 that my uncle gave me.
VCR.
I used in 1995.
I didn't make any movies really. I wrote though. In high school to college, I wrote a bunch of stuff that me and my buddy were, we were gonna make and shit like that. And it was very weird. I had a slasher film where Jay and Silent Bob got murdered in the very beginning of the movie.
You could make that today.
Right, exactly. I could probably get Kevin Smith to make it. So,
hey, Andy,
we'll give him a call.
Your director was your director was that guy? Did he do special effects?
Yeah, Tom fucking Savini, man.
Yeah. Okay.
Savini was. So I said Romero. These are the classic movie, and then Dawn of the Dead. Yeah. That's George Romero. Tom Savini did this remake. Big makeup effects guru, yes. And you can tell.
That's what I think probably.
Brought
it to the next level too. Is that
and Romero redid the script too. Romero wrote this screenplay as well for the new.
Yeah, Barbara's got an enhanced kind of Ripley from Aliens badass role a little bit.
What I wanted to talk about, Andy, a little bit was what's great about the original is it has a lot to say about racism at the time in the 1960s. And while obviously, as we know, we're still dealing with that in now. This movie wanted to go after how we see women. And it took, you're right, it definitely took from Alien and Aliens, the strong female, short hair. Barbara changes from, she's kind of how she is in the original movie in the beginning of this movie, but as the movie progresses, she becomes the stronger character of all the characters in the film. And I really liked how Savini did that with this film, and how Romero, they rewrote the screenplay to kind of, for the time, they were okay, strong women are in now. Let's make a strong woman zombie movie. and I think it works really well. I just rewatched it for the first time probably in 20 some years. This is one for me. I know you said you saw it like in high school. I remember watching this on TV. I mean, my parents, I guess, didn't do a really good job of stopping me from watching all these films on all the cable channels we had. My dad had a black box where you could watch all the pay-per-view channels or movies for free. So
baller.
I would take advantage of, and this is, we keep going back to porn. I would take advantage of what it was known as the Spice Channel, which for obvious reasons at night, but during the day they played a lot of 90s B horror films. That's how I saw Army of Darkness, Class of 1999 2, after I'd already seen Class of 1999, which is another one of my like favorite sci-fi weird robot movies. But I remember watching Night of the Living Dead, the remake, on TV. It's probably the first of the Romero movies I saw, because until I saw Dawn of the Dead I saw Night of the Living Dead, the original, obviously, and then I went to Dawn, which Dawn is one of my favorite horror films ever made. And Savini did the special effects on that. So to see Savini come and do this remake with Romero's blessing, and also to recognize that it's actually really well liked by the community. Everyone likes to point out how shitty remakes are. This is a remake that people like. It holds up still. I just watched it. It does have some cheesy moments from the late 80s, early 90s, obviously, but it's really good. Tony Todd is a great star.
Candyman.
Him being in Candyman and many other horror films. This movie, I think, what it did was it set up a lot of the horror of the 90s and what we got. And I do want to, Andy, at some point, and maybe we'll get Scott to come on too, because he's a big horror guy as well. I want to do a discussion with Wayne, obviously, because, Wayne, but he's not as big into horror, of 90s horror, because 90s horror doesn't get talked about as much as 80s horror. And I think Night of the Living Dead, the remake, is a good start to what we got in the 90s. I go to Dr. Giggles, and obviously there's Scream, Candyman, I Know What You Did Last Summer. But this was like this movie.
Quick side note: Tony Todd officiated my friend Kara's wedding.
That's amazing.
Love it.
Yeah, that is awesome. She showed me a picture of it. I was like, "That's amazing." That's Kara, Nicole, the cosplayer. Shout out!
Oh yeah.
That's incredible.
That's amazing. Sorry, Andy, you were going to say something. I know. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, no, I appreciate you taking us down that tangent, and the makeup is great. It is cheap at parts, and there's some. You talked about how great Tony Todd is. There's also some actors that aren't so great. But what I loved, and I just watched this 2 days ago, is the first time you see Tony Todd come out of the car after he barrels into a zombie, and there's some great zombie kills that aren't over the top, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They seem very natural. But the first reveal is he gets out of the front seat of the car, and he's got the end of a crowbar, which is like a hook. And it's like parallels perfectly that, he's going to play Candyman in, a couple more years.
Yeah.
Which I really, really loved. I don't know if there's no way that's intentional, at the time, but, and he just has an amazing, like, emotional performance, is what I noticed watching this time.
He's got a great screen presence. I mean, like, he's just one of those actors. We'll get to him in a minute when we talk about, or at the end when we talk about Bus's movie. Oh, nice! That's awesome.
Look at that. We're seeing a picture of it.
Of Tony Todd officiating the wedding. Keith David. He's very much like Keith David. He has that same kind of screen presence, that booming voice, and it was fun to see him in this movie, because it's not like in Candyman and Final Destination, like, you're hiring him because he's got that voice and that presence. It's nice to see a character, kind of him develop this character throughout the film, I think. He's really entertaining. I also want to mention one more thing. I just saw The Black Phone in theaters. Amazing. Everybody should go see it. Tom Savini did the special effects. He creates so he hasn't done a big budget movie in a long time. It was great to see, like, I found out kind of like right before, and then I looked it up afterwards to verify. And yes, he did.
That poster looks killer. The poster looks
so cool. Man. Such a, if you like emotional, like, horror films that around kids, it reminded me a lot of It, which is, it's based on a book from Joe Hill, which is Stephen King's son. So a lot like that in scope and in just how it makes it feel. But again, another tangent. Apologize. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say about Night of the Living Dead? I'm not sure how familiar you are.
Let me just say a couple more things. Going back to Tony Todd. what I enjoy, and you don't see it much in movies today, particularly zombie movies, is he's not immediately in like I'm in like kill mode. Like he's like torn that like these are real people, and I think that's like what the movie ultimately gets at. And like a lot of the horror that you mentioned have these themes, Candyman, that run underneath it that a lot of maybe casual viewers might miss. That kind of I think elevate them in a lot of respects, just about humanity. And I think there's and honestly there's a lot about like gun culture, from watching this movie in like the current day and age. Like, ultimately it's these good old boys this blasting, shooting zombies, and this is fun. Last one, it's from what I saw on TV versus unedited, it's almost the same movie. It's not really that gruesome. There's like some weird nudity in it. Honestly, like not gruesome like I could expect. Yeah. That's all.
All right, Wayne, your thoughts?
I really appreciated the jump scares, and just like even from the jump, the first zombie that we see, it just jumps out. It's like, what the fuck? And then you got the guy and the freshly buried guy who had the autopsy done, just the suit that's cut up the back just starts falling off. Like, all right, I see, okay. And again, as far like we commented on this already, as far as remakes go, really, really well done. Aside from the '80s cheesiness of some,
the restrictions of the time. I mean, there's certain things you have to accept. Like they had to do certain things a certain way because of the budget or the time. It wasn't a very highly budgeted movie either for the time. So there's a lot of things that, like when I say cheesy, I don't mean it's not a bad thing. It's just some things when you watch movies from back then don't age well, and you just kind of have to choose to recognize. Like a good example, my niece watched Poltergeist, and she's like, "Oh, it's kind of like cheesy," and I'm like, well, yeah, it was made in like 1982. Like you have to understand, like the special effects weren't very good, but the movie itself is still great, and you just have to like kind of look past that. So I think it's important to explain to the younger generations that they have to kind of accept the movies for what they looked like, and understand that that's just the restrictions of the time. JT, any thoughts on Night of the Living Dead 1990?
It's cool. I'm not a big zombie guy. I watched like a fuck ton of zombie movies in a row, like a movie night with some buddies about a decade ago, and that was one of them. And I remember, liking it, but it all kind of blurs together to me sometimes.
Right, for sure. I agree.
It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite subgenre. That's all. My brother's really into it though.
I really enjoyed that style of films, and I like I mean, can you say it's better than the original? Well, I mean, if you know nothing about like give credence to timing, right, or like what came first, I thought it was it was more entertaining. I mean, not. I don't want to take away from the original. Do you know what I'm saying? You've got to think of timing, right? Because you think the first one was like
1968.
Yeah. So I'm saying it's for a redo or a one that's in color, right? But you know what I'm saying? Like, let's give all those elements, and also, so I think it was more timely. It made it pulled me in a little bit more. Also, I think being rewatching it, I see these storylines with the strong female lead, and you see where like The Walking Dead ripped off Tony Todd's contemplating that inside that zombie is a person, and they early on when The Walking Dead was good, there was those storylines where you would be like, that's my brother inside that zombie.
Right.
So
exactly.
The headshot that I kill them both. You know what I mean? So to Andy's point, I just wanted to just briefly touch on that, and that's really I thought that was really well done and well written into it. That story.
For sure.
To have an emotion like that, where you're just thinking like, it's not just get a gun, shoot everybody in the head, and let's get the hell out of here. We all you have fight or flight, right? You won't know until you have to know.
And that's what I always like to tell people, because every time I watch a movie with somebody and they're like, "Oh, that's not how I would do it," I'm like, "You don't know."
You could stand there. My wife and I talk about this. We watch I Survived, horrid like reality, not reality TV. I Survived is like you may get attacked in your home by weirdos, and I tell my wife, I'm going to tap you on the leg and you run and I'll bum rush and make it out of the house. And she's like, I'm going to freeze. And I'm like, you can't freeze. I got to go for the kill or get killed, and you got to get out of the house. So
people always go like
fight or flight.
People always go like, in that universe, I'd be such a badass. And I'd be like, in this universe right now, you are not. So you probably wouldn't be there either.
Yeah. I was going to say you'd poop your pants in that universe as well. So anyway, where'd our host, Wayne, where'd your co-host go? He just bailed on us.
I don't know, but the show just got better. Check this out.
Look at it. Hey, our ratings went through the roof.
Every time I even hear the two words living and dead next to each other, I think of Return of the Living Dead, and then I think of I've had this whole time, 45 Grave party time stuck in my head.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Well, shit, he came back.
You know what I find interesting is how many movies I think are part of that franchise that may not even be. That's another thing I'll say.
Yep.
There's so much. What's the guy who just picked the locks? Hans or Franz, the German guy?
Oh, Army of the Dead. Yeah, you're thinking of.
Yeah. Is that a rip-off, isn't it? Or?
It's just its own thing.
Okay.
The thing is, like, everyone
homage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it homage? I mean, isn't it an homage?
Everyone thought Return of the Living Dead was part of the Living Dead series, but it is not. That's its own thing. And as we talk about 90s horror films, go watch Return of the Living Dead Part 3. That was another one that I watched.
Part 3.
Oh yeah, it's one of those. It's like it's the zombie apocalypse, but one of the main characters is a zombie, and she could like talk and shit. So it's like they become it was really for the time. I think it was really weird and bizarre. And again, it fits into those 90s movies that I would just randomly at night, here's this weird movie with, and then like, of course it had boobs in it. So I was like, boobs. And 13 years old.
I'm in.
And it's a movie that still sits with me. I'm like, oh man, I'll see people talk about it. And I'm like, oh, I just discovered this movie. I'm like, yeah, I remember that movie. That thing was insane.
Did it have a cool title like Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo? Did it have? It's like
it does have a subtitle. I forget what it was, but
because Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo is the greatest title ever.
And that's why even people that have never seen that movie reference
that.
They'll say, "Oh, Electric Boogaloo." But yeah, so like
exactly.
I wanted to mention Return of the Living Dead, the series, because it does kind of tie in with Romero's stuff. But like I said, it's not related at all. No, it's just called Return of the Living Dead 3.
Okay. I will see it. I will definitely see it.
It's another one. It's on Tubi. It's free somewhere. It's worth it, I think. And it's got people in it you'll recognize, where everyone thinks, I think Return of the Living Dead 2 is like 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, where this one and the first one are actually reviewed, for a horror movie well.
And hey, Mike, before I forget, and you guys, I would love to do this all together. I'm not bailing because my movie hasn't been talked about, obviously, but I would like to do one where it's a high rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but in reality, it sucks. Food for thought. Bring your own dish to pass, please.
I know exactly what movie I'd do.
Yeah. That's all I'm going to say. It's all I'm going to say. I've been using that as a barometer, and recently, and I'm not casting dispersions.
Here's the thing, though. You have to
name the giblets.
Here's what it is. Rotten Tomatoes is not. First off, it's not the end all be all.
I know, but it usually was good. I'll say. I guess I give too much credence to it because it never. It was like Jack Daniels, a good friend never lets me down, right? That's how Rotten Tomatoes was. It really was. I would go there and I'm like, I've never heard of this film. I don't know any of the actors in it, but let me see. And then I'm like, hey, it's like above 70, right? So I'm like, I got an hour and a half. Remember, you guys talk minutes when it's not a great movie. So then I'm counting minutes, right? So I count minutes, Rotten Tomatoes, boom. And I watch it. I'm like, this is really rough. Like, this is, so yeah, and it's not the end all be all, but I feel like it used to be a good roadmap.
I think what you might be searching for that might help you out more is Metacritic.
Okay.
Because Rotten Tomatoes to Kirky's, I think where Kirky was going, it's just, is it good or bad, right? So there might be a movie that's 2.5 stars, and there's some examples of this, and it'll be a positive review.
Yep.
And so it might have an 80% Rotten Tomatoes, but it's just okay. And there's, So Metacritic actually takes the score differently, so that you'll notice a lot of things, like check it. Yeah, much better for I think what you're aiming for.
Yes, Google even will do like blah 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 and blah blah blah, but 89% of the people who watched it enjoyed it, and sometimes that's as I said earlier, that's the only barometer I need, and Jurassic World was fit that.
Well, and that's another way. So Rotten Tomatoes too, it has averages. So even if something's 90%, it'll say it's 6.5 out of 10 because 6.5 is above 5. But you have to look at averages. That just means that basically everybody enjoyed the movie enough to rate it positively. Now, to Andy's point, when people say something's 2.5 stars, that's positive review. I've written Letterboxd or judged movies on Letterboxd where I give them 2.5 stars and I say I liked it. And then there's ones where I give 2.5 stars and I don't say I liked it. So there is that road of like, it's not a good movie, but I did enjoy myself, as opposed it's an okay movie. I didn't really enjoy myself, and I'll still be like 2.5. Now I'm generous with my ratings because I want to be entertained. I want to, but I also want a movie to hit me in a certain way, like Crimes of the Future. There are so many people that are not going to like that movie. It ends with a character smiling, which made me smile. So I told Andy, I'm like, it ended with joy. I had the look of joy on my face where someone would be like, that fucking guy's smiling over there? Like, what the fuck is going on?
I got to think that popcorn spilled on the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I
would have to think so, for that movie.
Oh, that's right. They do have that popcorn spill.
Well, they have the audience. They just have the audience reviews, and it's audience ratings for movies like that do tend to be lower. All right, I got more tangents than I'm planning on. We're going to get to JT's next. JT, why don't you introduce your film?
Booyah. So my film is Gremlins 2, The New Batch. I was thinking of doing The Decline in Western Civilization. I'm like, too esoteric. I'm into the germs and not everybody else is. But like
Andy and I saw it.
Yeah. I was going to watch it.
Our first one's a great one, but I love Gremlins 2 because like I realized at some point that's my favorite sequel and favorite cult movie, because it's like I think a lot of us did, where it's like we grew up in the 80s and 90s, like we were watching cult films and didn't know they were cult films. You know what I mean? Like as a kid, I grew up watching UHF constantly. You know what I mean? And then I didn't know that I wasn't watching boxoffice.com or whatever back then. You know what I mean? Like checking it and being like, oh, did it make money? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know. I just thought this was a hilarious freaking movie. You know what I mean? And then you get a little bit older and you're like, oh, not everybody has seen this. And like, not everybody quotes it. But then you find the other weirdos like you who do. And you're like, oh, all right. Now we're like kindred spirits or whatever,
Did
so
we
like
just become best friends?
I was today years old when I found out that Howie Mandel is the voice of Gizmo.
I just saw that in the credits.
Oh, you didn't know?
Yeah. I saw it in the credits
when I saw his name, I was like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I love the Gremlins movies 1 and 2. 1 works because it's like a subversion of like classic Christmas movies, and kind of like a lot of 80s movies did, like kind of spitting in the face of Reaganism and stuff like that. And like it's just a anarchic fun time, and also like a horror movie, and it's many genres in one. So like it works on those levels. But Gremlins 2 is on a different level. That movie, like first of all, it's a sequel that tried something different, which you don't see a lot these days. It's always they just make the same one again, But like this one like it was like it's even funnier when you know the story behind it, because it's like Joe Dante, the director of Gremlins, was given like the opportunity to make a 2 for like 6 straight years, because the first one came out in 84, the second one came out in 90, and he said no. And then they like went to other people. They couldn't get him to do it, or they just like didn't agree with them or something. So they came back to Dante and they like pretty much begged him, and they said, we'll give you full creative control and a huge budget. And he's like, really? So he's like, all right, well, the movie's going to start with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck fighting over the Warner Brothers logo. And that's going to set the tone for the rest of the movie, So it's like, guess what? You're about to watch a cartoon, like a live action cartoon. And that's what it was. And like, there are so many snarky things in there that like tell you that like he's making this to have fun, and like that, you know, like commercial art is nonsense. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think, you know, watching it again, JT, I think it was one of the first like movies we got that was very meta. It was very much like you're watching a movie within a movie, and we know you're watching a movie. So it was interesting from that standpoint. To go to Dante, so he has a podcast that he does with the guy that wrote History of Violence, and I listen to it. They basically it's kind of like what we're doing now. They bring an actor or director or writer on, and then they talk about like 10 movies that they, you know, love in their lifetime or whatever, or just movies they want to talk about. And Dante on that podcast talked about when he made Gremlins 2, he always, and it's funny because later in life he got to make one, but he wanted to make a Looney Tunes movie. Like that was his goal. He wanted to make that. So when he was, like you said, given the freedom to do whatever he wanted, this was the sequel that came to mind. And they were like, sure. And then of course I've obviously afterwards, I'm sure this is about the time where the studios started to button up a little bit on that whole thing. Because remember, we got Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and then we got Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which kills the two main characters in the beginning of the movie. Something you would not do.
I love it probably more than the first one.
And it's like, you can't do, like you said, they don't do it anymore. And it's not the directors, it's not the writers, it's the studios. The studios, when something is successful, they want the same thing again, because that's what they think people are going to like. Back in the 80s and 90s, yes, they made sequels to movies, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So they were like, yeah, I mean, you hit it out of the park with the first one, do whatever you want. And then obviously they reeled it back in when they realized they weren't making. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is a great example of Canon Films made that movie. They gave Tobe Hooper all the money he wanted, which one of the Canon Films guy, Andy, I was going to bring this up, produced Night of the Living Dead as well. It was their new company, the Remake. So they gave Tobe Hooper, like, oh, we want this crazy horror film that you made from 1974. He made a fucking comedy that was using Breakfast Club like mock posters as its promotion. So it's like, you had directors back then who were just wanting to do what they want. So I'm glad that Dante got to do his movie, whether you like it or not, whether it still holds up or not. Just know that this guy got to make, this is the movie he wanted to make, and it came out basically how he wanted it to. So right. I think that is just impressive and a feat in itself.
It's thoroughly entertaining the entire way through, and like just so sarcastically meta so many times. Like not even in just like obvious ways, like when Leonard Maltin gets attacked by the Gremlins for giving a bad review to the first one. But like even in subtle ways where like, and we all know this from like working in TV and working in video editing and, you know, that kind of thing, or where it's like, think about the scene where like Billy Peltzer is drawing the new Asian clamp center, you know, where business gets oriented. Oh my God, that movie! But like, he's sitting there drawing it, and then his supervisor says, "Add some more trees." And then he's like, "Really? Are they going to put them there?" And she's like, "No, but you're going to draw them." He draws the trees, and then Daniel Clamp, played by what's this guy? He did the Riddler in Batman.
Glover. Was it John Glover?
John Glover. Yes, thank you.
John Glover.
He's been in a lot of stuff, but like, he comes down and like he's like the most gleeful like supervillain ever. That guy's hilarious in that movie. But like he walks over and he says like, maybe leave those trees though. You know what I mean? And then he's like, when people see the trees, they think disease and stuff. And then they both go, absolutely. At the same time, him and his manager that made him draw the trees. Yep. And I'm like, that is exactly what it is like to be a commercial artist. Like, and a video editor and a scriptwriter. And you know what I mean? Where it's like somebody comes in with a stupid revision, and then somebody above them comes in and makes you go back to the way it was, and they get the credit for telling you to go back to the way it was, and the supervisor agrees with them. You know what I mean? It's like just so many dumb little moments like that. And
Speed
like,
HD.
Yeah. So it's like, so every little piece of that movie is like dripping with just little jabs at like commercialism. You know what I mean? And it's so great. It's still so tightly made, and the creature effects are amazing. The brain gremlin with Tony Randall, and it even has like the like one of the best jump scares ever, where they're all trashing the Gremlins 1 rules in the control panel room.
Yeah,
you know, or he's like, "Hey, what if he like eats something on an airplane and they cross a time zone, it's got to be midnight somewhere. Then Mohawk just right out of the control panel.
Out of the control panel. Yeah.
There's a little bit of room for him, but the camera's moving, so there's a little bit of room for him to pop into frame, but you're not going to see it coming. Like if you're first watching the movie, because it's like, why would he come from there? You know what I mean? Because the movie has no logic when it comes to it's got cartoon logic basically. But
yes.
But I love that movie for being like really entertaining and a sarcastic stab at sequels. And I feel like that's what the new Matrix tried to do and failed, because there was almost a little too much sincerity to it. You know what I mean? Yeah. I saw the new Matrix and I walked out thinking, man, if only the rest of this movie was like the beginning and the end. You know what I mean? Because like for the 1 hour, 45 minutes second act, we had to like go to Zion and all that crap. And it was like suddenly as boring as the second and third Matrix movies. I'm like, stick to the like, I didn't want to make this, so fuck you, here's my movie stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. All right, so who wants to go next on Gremlins 2 here? Bus?
You know what? I almost felt like it was disjointed from the first one, but granted, it was as big a film as any. I believe I worked at a video store when that came out, and it was I'd have to double check the dates on that. But anyway, rewatching it, I was like, I noticed product placements. Like I noticed there was a Jolt Cola. One thing that I never noticed before was like a Jolt Cola can. And I just felt like they literally just, like, to JT's explanation, there was no one put the reins on anybody. It's like, oh, just go crazy. Just make a movie as wacky, as gremlin-y as you want. Make sure Phoebe Cates is in there. Make sure Billy, what's the main kid, Billy?
Zach Galligan.
Yeah, but what's
Billy
his...
Billy?
Yeah. So let's make sure those two are in there, and then just go ape shit. And that's kind of what they did in it. I mean, Mogwai. And then did they shoot Once Upon a Time, what was it? What was the Kurt Russell film? No, Big Trouble in Little China. I'm like, they stole the dude, right? The dude in the beginning is the same dude from. I swear it's like he's in Big Trouble in Little China.
When they did those movies back in the day like that, where they would go into Chinatown a lot back in the 80s.
I swear they
a lot of times the same actors.
Yeah. And I swear they used the same guy. Yeah, but a very similar guy. But like, so JT, they like kept that, right? So it's like Chinatown's gonna get tore down, and they're trying to buy out the old guy, and the old guy's like, nah, no thanks. And but then he dies because the henchman finds out he's got that nasty cough. He's gonna go. Am I spoiler alert for anyone that's gonna watch?
It came out over 30 years ago. I think we're good.
But anyway, so then you got that. So you get the Mogwai, but in the first 15 minutes, I'm like going, when did he get the Mogwai back? At the end of Gremlins 1, did they give the Mogwai back?
They did. That's how it ends. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He comes back to get him.
It threw me off because it's been so long since I've seen Gremlins 1, which I believe it to me when people say Die Hard's a Christmas movie, Gremlins is a Christmas movie. To me,
Gremlins is
absolutely.
Am I right? I mean, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's a Christmas present. For fuck's sake. But anyway, so I just felt like they took everything they wanted. They just threw everything at the wall and saw what stuck, and no one told them no. And it just went ape shit with like.
Yeah.
And I made fun of the first movie so many times too.
Oh, they did. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I love the return of Dick Miller too, because you're pretty sure when you watch Gremlins that Dick Miller dies, but because Joe Dante will never make a movie without Dick Miller, they like wrote that in there that he almost died, but he's okay.
Yeah. Actually, if you listen, this is how many times I watched both those movies. If you listen to the TV in the background at the end of the first movie, right before the Mr. Wing walks in, the people on the TV talking about the incident say in the background, like, Mr. and Mrs. Fireman, who barely survived, like,
okay.
that there was a line in there indicating that they were
in the new movie to remind people that he was still that just in case they missed that. Probably they wanted to put that in the second one.
Yeah, and I watched that was. Go ahead.
I watched and it was in the first movie. Yeah.
No, I know, but I'm saying the line in the second movie, I think, was probably added to remind people that they were still.
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha.
Otherwise, if you knew that, you know what I mean? Like, if everyone knew, you wouldn't have to say it again.
Well, and what's interesting, sometimes, and this may be corny or dumb, but depending what's going on in my house, I will have the volume down a little bit lower, and then I'll just have closed captioning on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not, the volume's still up where I can hear it. But it was funny because I can't remember. If next time you watch it, Phoebe Cates towards the end when she's going and she got the wrong Mogwai. She got the guy with they kept going. He was like the crack gremlin or whatever, or crack Mogwai. There's just little nuances, and like to JT's point about the TV reporter, you get to hear what at least it'll say inaudible or something, so you do pick up stuff. And I mean, you can't beat a movie that plays "Angel of Death" by Slayer, and Faith No More. I can't think of the Faith No More. It'll come to me. Faith No More has a song in there too. It's almost like a karaoke version, but it's them. I mean,
that's funny.
It is "Angel of Death" playing, and I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah, when the spider gremlin mohawk is taken.
Yeah. And your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think JT and Boss are hitting on a lot of this, but it's just such a fun movie. I have great memories of, being 8 or 9 and watching this. I saw this first before I actually saw the original Gremlins. So I had no expectations about the Futtermans or anything like that. It's just tons of fun. I mean, Hulk Hogan makes an appearance. I didn't know what meta was as a kid. You just realize how cartoony the movie is. Mm-hmm. I think that even kind of, it is a PG-13 movie, but I think, there are a couple like Christopher Lee's character. I feel like he gets electrocuted or something. There's a few whoa, that's pretty rough.
His name is Dr. Catheter.
I just remember then the collection of Mogwais become Gremlins and all these unique features, and it was just such a fun movie. I wish I would have watched it. I'm kind of mad at myself for not watching it before this podcast here, but really really like it a lot, and I've been anxiously awaiting Gremlins 3 now for 22 or 32 years.
Much like Spaceballs 2, The Search for Mo Money.
Yes. We are getting an animated HBO Max series.
That's right.
The origins of the Mogwai or something like that. So there will be that in the future. Wayne, your thoughts on Gremlins 2? I believe you did get to watch it, correct?
Yep. Then not like I haven't seen it a million times, which has always been a childhood, treasure of mine. But obviously the veggie Mogwai guy, Gremlin.
Yeah.
What's the name of the movie they were talking about? The veggie Gremlin, and obviously when they bust out the New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those parts I've always remembered was the New York part.
And we already talked. Hulk Hogan's like, listen here, you guys, you got to start that movie back up, brother.
What's funny about that too is that I first saw it on VHS. I didn't see it in the theater as a kid, and on the VHS version, the film doesn't split; it actually goes to static, and then you see. And then they almost like the Gremlins almost change the channel between a bunch of different stuff. Yeah. And they end up on John Wayne, and John Wayne shoots them all, and he says sorry about that. We'll get back to your movie or whatever. I think it was, like a guy doing his voice or whatever. But then I saw it on HBO a couple of years later, and I saw the Hulk Hogan thing because when HBO played it, they played the theatrical version. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Whoa, where did this come from? You know what I mean? And now I know that to be the real way it's supposed to be. But there was a VHS version of that scene.
Well, and I could totally see Dante coming up with the idea of let's, if we got to edit stuff out, let's do some fun things. And I could see him wanting to do something like that. So that's very cool. I didn't know that was out there. I may or may not have seen it when I was a kid like that. I don't remember. But yeah, it watching it again, I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's one of those movies that gets crazier and crazy. Again, while it's not as dark as some of the other movies that we've talked about, that like it does do that thing where it gets weirder and weirder and weirder the further you get into the movie. Which again speaks to a certain type of person. I think not everyone's gonna like that. It's not like the first one. It's just it's a lot of fun. It was great revisiting. I love John Glover as the villain because he's always one of my favorites from Scrooge with Bill Murray. And what I thought was great is you didn't get the typical like we're gonna murder this villain by the end of the movie. He's still the same person by the end of the movie. He's learned nothing, and he's his business the way he's always done his business. And it was back when everybody could write a book, no matter who you were. And I got a great idea for another book, and we're gonna do
my sister and I watched that movie together about like 5 years ago or something, and we're huge 30 Rock fans, and we both like realized like, hey, wait a minute, Daniel Clamp is like the precursor to Alec Baldwin's character on 30 Rock to Jack Donaghy, and like where it's like he's like this gleefully awful conservative businessman. And you can't help but find him charming anyway, even though everything that comes out of his mouth is the worst thing ever.
Oh yeah, it was so good. And I do want to say too, you called online, you called it the best sequel ever made. That's obviously up for debate. But in one of the other best sequels ever made, Terminator 2, the two twins from this movie are also in Terminator 2 as they play the orderly at the hospital who gets killed by T-2000 turns into him. So it's both the twins on screen at once, and T-2000 kills him. I thought that was great. Anytime I see them in old movies, I'm like, oh, so they were actors who just kind of did.
I know. So Gremlins 2 kind of ruined Terminator 2 for me because I saw Terminator 2 after, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. I've seen those two guys in Gremlins 2. I know that they're brothers. You know what I mean?
There's no special. That was
a funny line by Christopher Lee, though, in that where he's like, how's the cloning work coming along? And the other one turns around, great, doctor.
Yeah, I just thought that was a great thing to notice. Andy, you look like you were going to say something. No? Okay. All right. Well.
The Faith No More song is Surprise You're Dead. Just I know Andy's a big Faith No More fan, so that's also in Gremlins too.
I'll have to rewatch it just for that.
Yeah.
It's on HBO Max if anybody wants to watch it, or HBO, I think, as well.
I just finished watching it on HBO.
Was that in the Lego scene where he pushes over the Lego and then Gizmo gets hit by the train?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
They had him tied to the train track. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was going to
mention. Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. The Surprise You're Dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to say that.
We just talked about a movie from 1990, Andy, Night of the Living Dead, where we were talking about how the guns and stuff like that. I love how we have this movie, came out in 1990, and guns are very much a positive thing in this film. As he
all over
on TV, and it gets pumped. And it's just funny to see how we, and this was obviously a much more major motion picture than Night of the Living Dead. So to see in our big budget movie how we were basically like, we got to have a gun. Yeah. We got to have flaming arrows. He's got to dress like Rambo, who's a guy who kills a bunch of people. So I just thought
it chooses to tackle some other topical issues, that are still resonant today.
Oh, this is the last thing I got to tackle about this movie is that the callback to the first one where it made fun of itself. Where in the first one, Joe Dante fought the studio tooth and nail to leave in the part where Phoebe Cates tells the tragic story about her dad dying dressed as Santa Claus. And it was like this, he was like, oh, it's just, it's a funny, horrible black joke, and they were like, and everybody watching it was like, it was kind of awkward, what I mean? And then in the second one, like she's like, oh, don't talk about Lincoln's birthday. Something terrible happened to me on Lincoln's birthday. And she starts telling a story and they're like, I don't think we have time for this. And like literally drag her off screen.
I forgot that they did that in this movie. So when that came out, I listened to the Movie Crypt podcast with Joe Lynch and Adam, drawing a blank on his name, two directors, but they talk about that all the time and how everyone was against that Christmas scene, but it really kind of humanizes that character in that movie. And the fact that they basically played a joke on that, I'm sure when she started doing it, the studios, that's why he did it, I guarantee you, was so that he could see the studio executives go, oh no, not again. Oh, come on. And then they like pull her off screen. Like, I got you.
Lincoln's birthday too.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's actually kind of dark because she infers that maybe Lincoln, I think she inferred that Lincoln touched her.
Like, yeah. touched her or kidnapped her or something.
Yeah, got her in a van, but they trail her off. They just take her off scene and it's trailing off. And I'm watching the closed captioning. So she says it was very it wasn't that great, trust me, or something. And she's off
you
screen.
can hear it. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, you hear it. Yeah. All right. So we're getting to our last movie. I feel like this is already going to be divisive as we've had some messages back and forth. I would argue that it's probably our darkest film that we're going to talk about, even though we have talked about other darker films, our dark films as well. All right, Dave, take it away. This is your baby. You want to?
Yeah. So 2000, if I'm remembering, I was going to pull it up, but I remember a lot of this. So, and so you guys said impactful films, right? So I graduated from Columbia College. Embarrassed to say not embarrassed to say I graduated, but that it was 1995. So doing a lot of, I know, right? Doing a lot of corporate video and nothing creative. So I think besides like I embraced sort of the dark side of the film, and I felt like the editing style was pretty interesting. Whether it's a split screen or it's when they shoot up, it's the spoon, the needle, the arm, and then they go to like a wide shot of them back into real time, so to speak. But also the mom clicks the channel. The remote control is kind of her drug, and so you see, yeah. So I want to say that was the impactful thing to me. And it's so. I mean, I found it. JT, I'm dying to hear your thing because, I mean, I did laugh where Castlevania the soundtrack sounded, but I want to say, to me, like the music driving it was dark. The storyline, if you like just break it down, it's basically. I mean, can we all agree it's about addiction? It's some form of addiction, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So either you're gonna, and Ellen Burstyn, to me, like she got, I feel looking back, she got duped because Erin Brockovich won that year for Best Actress. But just because I think I love Ellen Burstyn, so maybe I just wanted her to win more. But like Andy's already laughing. But I don't know. It's I mean, it's just dark, but. I think that we went with impactful films, right? I think it was
something that meant something to you.
Yeah, and I've had friends with addiction, but never was that close to them. Like acquaintances with addiction. Mm-hmm. So that part didn't really hit me. So it was more like the style of the editing, the some of the shots, and just the. Using music and the visuals to kind of drive the story and show you how, like, I mean, the kind of the sex scene at the end with all the flashlights and that I feel gross. I mean, I really feel gross when after watching that. And so that was just very impactful. I felt gross after watching the film, just in general. I felt dirty.
Yeah, I felt depressed. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I just remember just an incredible amount of buzz around this movie, and it very much. I think we've talked a lot about VHS era movies, and this is at the tail end of that. Like, but just you got to see this movie, and obviously we've touched on others that maybe were more comedic, dark in different ways. Horror. This is very like hyper realism. Terrors of addiction, be it drugs. There's obviously like a huge sex component in the film. It's shocking. And it also had Darren Aronofsky, attached to it, big buzz director. So that my recollection, I've probably not seen it since, the early 2000s, but my recollection is just like, this was kind of a hip movie to see and know about if you cared about film.
Yes.
And if you like this, if you profess that you like this, you were getting a deeper meaning in some sense of or you appreciated film in a different way than other people. And I know that's kind of been a theme throughout all of these, even though they're very different films. But I remember really liking it a lot. At the same time, I still haven't revisited it because it really was kind of haunting in that way. I just remember Marlon Wayans' stump of an arm.
Other guy. Jared Leto.
Other guy, Jared Leto.
Oh, Jared Leto stump of an arm. Okay, sorry.
He shoots up in a septus arm, so it's like,
yeah.
It's
there
already
you go.
It's already going to be gone. You might as well juice that sucker up. Boom.
Jeez.
No, the Marlon Wayne's thing is the black guy ends up in jail at the end. Like that was
okay. All right, I mixed them up.
Kind of the times we still unfortunately live in.
And you know, before we get to, and I know JT and Wayne got some stuff to weigh in on here. So before we get to that, I just want to rewatching this movie. Why I messaged everybody, "Fuck you, Bus," for making me watch this again because it's very depressing. It does for me. It still hits pretty hard. Again, I've never really known anyone really with that hard of an addiction. I've smoked cigarettes and stuff, so I was addicted to that, but not like this. Obviously, this is completely different. And just to see it from all levels, you got the television, and then she takes the pills, and then you got the heroin, and you got the sex stuff, and it just, to me, it's a hard hitting film. The last 10 minutes are just very like. And I think you guys are going to talk about this, but it's very much in your face. Like, this is what's happening, and everything's just kind of spiraling out of control. And the editing really kicks in full blast there. The song kicks in full blast, which we've heard throughout the movie. And this, it's not very often do you have a song that's a score that was written for a film that goes and then is used in several other movies. That doesn't usually happen. You'll hear an AC/DC song, obviously, in several movies and stuff, but not usually an original scored song for a movie. So I think that song is just more impactful with that knowledge, knowing that it's been used over and over again.
And it's used in such a driving manner, you know what I mean? That like it starts out with subtle bits and it like crescendos, you know what I mean?
Yes,
like
exactly. Yeah. And I think too, the performances, like, we don't give Jennifer Connelly enough respect. Jennifer Connelly is an amazing actress. And I think she got overlooked for this movie, and I think we definitely need to that was an oversight, I think. And she's so good, she's so great in this movie. Just to watch her performance throughout. And it's funny because she's in Top Gun Maverick, so to see her. People now like, oh my god, have you guys seen this Jennifer Connelly person? Like, almost like younger people are discovering her for the first time. It's like, okay, she's been around for a while, guys. Like, oh, she's still hot. Like, yeah, we know that, guys. Yeah, so right, like,
anyone?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Kirky, did you say ass to ass when they said that, or no?
No.
Sorry.
Cut
that out.
Yes. We'll leave it in. I don't care. We're talking about porn in this fucking thing. No matter to me. Yeah, so anyway, that to me is what sat with me with the performances. Jared Leto was obviously very good. Marlon Wayne's very good. As Wayne and I have talked about recently, Adam Sandler he's really good in his dramatic work. I wish Marlon Wayans would have gotten a chance to do more dramatic work. This movie didn't make a lot of money, so I guess a lot of people didn't come calling, but he was really good in this movie. Just kind of an under seen gem, really, because again, this is what you would describe as a cult movie. It's up there with like something like, and I know JT and I, we've talked about before, like something like Donnie Darko. Of this time when this movie came out, those were the two movies that you'd be like, oh, well, did you see Donnie Darko? Did you see Requiem for a Dream? Have you seen those movies? I do also want to point out, it does fall in the category that when I was working at Blockbuster, I had people, oh, that movie's amazing, and like almost like glorifying it in a way, similar to Trainspotting and similar to American History X. And like they're all three great movies, but they're very depressing, very real, nothing to glorify. And I think that was
nothing to be celebrated.
I had when people would do that with this movie. Like, man, that's like, yes, it's a great movie, but it's terrible. You're not supposed to be excited about, like, I had someone talk to me about the curb stomping thing in American History X is an amazing moment. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to stop being friends with you right now because shit just got weird. And racist. JT, go.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the problems I have with drug movies as a genre in the first place, is that like it romanticizes it. Like almost all drug movies romanticize drugs, and whether romanticize does not have to mean positive. By the way, romanticize can mean negative too. It's just that like if you romanticize something in a negative way, you kind of turn people into martyrs for something that they really shouldn't be for. You know what I mean? So like a junkie could watch that movie and be like, yeah, oh, that's my life. Oh yeah. You know what I mean? And all this stuff. And it's like, dude, like, no, like, don't view yourself as like this fictional person with a soundtrack and with the Hollywood makeup and all this stuff. That's not what you are. That's not what's going on right now. You know what I mean? Like, this is, you really need some help, and you're probably really messing with a lot of people in your life. You know what I mean? Like, this is a bad thing. You know what I mean?
You're
This
hurting
isn't
a lot of people.
Yeah, this isn't a movie bad thing. Like, don't make yourself out to be like you're a character in a movie. And sometimes I feel like that's what these movies do, these drug movies, is they kind of like glorify it in a negative way. You know what I mean? Like it's like a beautiful picture of a withered rose or whatever. You know what I mean? A beautiful painting of a withered rose. It's like, oh, withered rose, that's terrible, but this picture is beautiful. And it's like, there shouldn't be anything beautiful about this. Like, if I was ever tasked with making a drug movie, I would make it so that like they lose all their friends. Like you see somebody from 18 to 28 or even 35, and like you see their life unfold before them, and you watch all the shit they missed out on. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't show them like, you know, having sex with a starlet, with like, you know, like a really attractive starlet like Jennifer Connelly, who is made up to look like she's not a starlet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in some dingy, perfectly lit green, color graded, like hotel room or whatever. You know what I mean? I would rather show like realistic lighting, like somebody losing all their friends and like missing out on stuff, like not having a personality outside of the fact that they do drugs, because that's what a lot of like, I don't know, people who got into drugs, like that's kind of how I viewed them. It was like that was their personality. That was like their, it was like their fandom, the way that Star Wars is a fandom for people. You know what I mean? It's like drugs is their fandom. So I'd rather like, I'm waiting for the day that somebody shows me a drug movie where they show like the unromantic parts of it. You know what I mean?
That made me think of the Breaking Bad episode where the couple is all strung out on heroin and obviously the blue meth and you know, the skank ass skank, and she drops the ATM on the guy's head. I ain't no skank. Yeah, the real, you know, where they're fucking and bumping open stores type thing.
Yeah.
Like, well, I have a recommendation for you, JT. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not. Half Nelson.
No.
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling, because that is shot.
You know what I mean?
That is shot like a like what you're talking about. There's no glamour to that. Like, obviously Aronofsky is an artist, so what we get from Requiem for a Dream is a very cinematic looking drug film,
and it's great. I love it on a technical level. Every last thing that Bus said is like, yeah, totally right. Yeah. Like this is killer. The editing style, the driving soundtrack, like the way it was shot, like if you're gonna do a drug sequence, it doesn't get better than her watching TV and like Shooter McGavin,
my God,
walking off the set and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
I'll get back to Half Nelson. Christopher McDonald's performance as the TV host, Shooter McGavin,
so good.
Like, especially the last couple scenes that he's in towards the end.
You're gonna win,
right?
You're gonna win.
But Half Nelson, oddly enough, directed by the directors of Captain Marvel, so they did a very showy movie with Captain Marvel. Very much like, it's one camera essentially. It's almost like you're watching a documentary, and it's about Ryan Gosling's character. He's a teacher, and he's got a student who looks up to him, but he's a heroin addict. So it's very much like a slow. Falcon's in it. Anthony Mackie's in it. So it's got like this slow burn to like his.
It's a great film.
It is so good. It took me years to watch it. It's really good. I think it's kind of what you're talking about, JTM, the kind of movie that you want. It doesn't glorify it in a negative way or a positive way. It just kind of is, and it shows you what he's losing throughout that movie.
Yeah, he doesn't. Well, and JT, to your point, I think that, and I appreciate your point of view on that, but it's like, and all those movies, like at the end, that last 10 minutes where we'll just say like the last 10 minutes of Requiem for a Dream. I mean, it is a gut punch, and then a you know, a kick to the sack. I mean, it's heavy, and it's heavy, but it still made it sexy throughout the film. You know what I mean? Till the
Right.
end, where it's like, now look, I mean, you know, when you're getting electric shock therapy, when you're getting your arm chopped off, when, you know, it was like, but that's that they leave that little thing for the end. So I know what you're saying. I mean, I think he tried to put a button on it saying, and this is
Don't
how
do
bad
drugs.
it can get. Yeah, don't do drugs. But it was like, there's so many kind of cool, chill, the music, the editing made it maybe a little more fun than it should have been, I guess.
Well,
Did you see Permanent Midnight, Kirky?
Yeah, Ben Stiller, yeah.
Did you see that one, JT?
No, I don't think it did.
That's
Check
a good one.
that one out too, because he's a junkie in there, and I give Ben Stiller a great thing. And you're seeing like you're seeing the demise of someone who's supposed, and it's like he's a TV guy, so he's a writer.
Yeah.
It shows like a fragile aspect of it. Not to take away from, but anyway, so you have some homework, Half Nelson and Permanent Midnight, but
there was a couple of things where it was like, I mean, and this is not me being anti-artsy. This is not me being anti-depressing or anti-Aronofsky, because I love Pi and I love Black Swan. And my favorite movie of all time, No Country for Old Men, is bleak and awful. So like, it's not like I'm against any of those things. It's just that, I don't know. Like for some reason, I'm extra critical when it comes to drug movies, and like, it's a great movie. It is. It's like, it's really tight, it's well packed, and like it has like a flow to it that, you know, like builds to something, you know, incredible at the end on a technical level. Just from a story level though, is kind of where I had trouble with it, where like I called it on Facebook this morning, like the world's like most unintentional comedy. And like, because like the part that made most people depressed at the end, I just kind of laughed at, like when it was over, because I was like, well, this I was like,
you have no soul.
Yeah, I was like, if you tell me a story about like, you know, it's like, oh man, somebody got hit by a bus, I'll be like, oh, that's fucking terrible. And then somebody told me like, oh, somebody got hit by a bus, and then they flew into a manhole cover, and then a bunch of lizards attacked them and ate them, and then an anvil dropped on their head,
and then they caught fire,
and then Wile E. Coyote dropped the piano on them. You know what I mean? I'd be like, well, this isn't sad anymore. This is funny. Yeah. And like, to me, that's what the end of that movie was. It was like the consequences were so over the top and like presented in such an over the top manner, where it's like this. Jared Leto's character is like a pencil pusher, like, you know, when it comes to like, you know, he's, you know, like reserved about like conservative with his money and all that stuff, and it's like, you think somebody that pays attention to details like that wouldn't shoot up a gangrenous arm, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I like his thought though. No, just do it. I'm just gonna do it. Like, oh, okay.
Right. So I don't know, it was like it almost felt like a really artsy version of Reefer Madness, you know what I mean? Where it was like, like if you do drugs, you're gonna jump off a building, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like you lose your friends or you might end up in jail. It's like, no, like you will lose an arm and you know.
Yeah. I see, when you posted that, JT, I was like, I was discussing it with my wife, and I'm like, I think JT and I have similar tastes. And I'm like, I'm not sure where he's going with the comedy thing. But now that you say that, it makes more sense. And it's like, if you had one of those things happen, and you could just do like, and maybe the mom is, you know, not everybody has the worst thing. And there could be just one of those things to be like not everybody had, you know, there's not a rainbow at the end. You know, there's not a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. But that, like, I admit, now that you say that, it's like, and then this happens, and then this, and then this, and then this, and it's like, geez Louise. I mean, I saw it in a fine arts theater down in Lincoln Park when the first time around, and when the lights came up, I have to admit, you look around and people were just sitting there, and it was a weird mood in the actual theater. Yeah. This is before it got any buzz. It was just the first time around, right? So people were sitting there, and there was probably 20 people, but this theater probably held 80. So I mean, it wasn't like it's one of those smaller ones, you know. And when the credit, I watched through the credits, and you know, and then the lights came up, and you look around, and then people are just like looking at each other, like going, "My life doesn't suck that bad." You know, I mean, I guess that
Right.
was one of my kind of takeaways from it, but. I would appreciate your viewpoint because that makes more sense. It's like one more thing.
Yeah,
you know?
no, and I think too what I wanted to bring up with that, and then we'll have Wayne get his thoughts in here, was whenever you see a movie like this, and it's similar, and I know JT, we've talked at length about American Beauty, but you get like over exaggerations in film, and I think like you watch a movie about a dysfunctional family, and literally everything that could go wrong to them happens, but it's because they're trying to seek out entertainment, I think, and they don't know that there are people out there that would watch. You're like, oh, it'd be okay if just one person suffered from their consequences, you know. Then we're smart enough beings to get that, at least the people that are supposed to like this type of movie, to understand that we, you know, just because Jared Leto's arm didn't get cut off, we still realize that he made bad choices in life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we didn't need to, I get what you're saying, but movies do tend to over exaggerate, for better or worse. I mean, whether you like that or not, that's just something I think that we tend to get in movies like this that are, I don't want to say this movie's giving us a message, but obviously, like you said, it ends negatively. So it's not meant to be like drugs or fun. But it does try to hit it over your head, I guess, maybe in a way. But yeah, all right, Wayne. So what are your thoughts on Requiem? I know you got a chance to watch it again.
Yeah, the shock value, like we were talking about at the end there. It's like we talked, like JT, you talked about the he's a conservative with his money, but he's also a raging drug addict at the same time. It's like it doesn't mesh. Like this is just things of me who, you know, has had experience with addicts like this before in my life, and it's just the over dramatization we got, like we already talked about. So I'm not going to say anything groundbreaking that we haven't already commented on, but just I don't know, the downward spiral of each of the characters. When you're sitting there, it's like, all right, which of these is the most tragic? And it's like, I don't know if I could list them 1 to 4 because they're all pretty fucking bad.
Yeah. And you know what, Wayne, to that point is, I think the mom, if you really look at it, lost her husband.
Yep.
She is a very
enabled
her son. Enabled her son. She's lonely. Enabled her son. Her son. That's a relationship of convenience for the son to the mom, right? It's when he needs something. Ma. You know, he's always saying, and you know, it's telling when she locks herself in the closet when he goes to take the TV. Like all those weird, like that says a lot more. To me, that was more impactful than even the arm getting chopped off.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's like, why are you locking yourself in the closet when this is once a week he takes the damn television? It's almost she's scared of something. And then later when the TV kind of everything in the refrigerator, everything starts coming. So then she gets hooked on pills. You know, she has no real friends. Those ladies outside the apartment building, they're not her friends. So actually, if you're really thinking about it, she didn't even really have a life. Everybody else at least had moments.
She was the most interesting character in that movie. You know,
well,
Jared Leto I could give a shit about, and like Jennifer Connelly's pretty to look at, but she's just, you know, I don't know, like it's like do drugs and you become a hooker. Like I don't know, but like
that's not what happens. I've heard that's basically the formula, man.
I was gonna say that they didn't teach me anything new as far as that goes, but the mom, I was like, holy shit, you know, she's gone through it.
I think with Leto and Connelly and Marlon Wayans, you're hitting on the epidemic that we're now, you know, is kind of in full force now. And it was maybe in its infancy back then.
22 years later.
Right, exactly. But with the mom, what I liked about watching the movie now is that it does kind of take to task the healthcare of America. And the fact that, you know, they don't really take time to figure out. I mean, you could even take it to his arm. They saw his arm was fucked up and were more scared about them stealing the drugs than helping him. And it's like, so you go to a hospital, your arm is gangrene, and they just send you to prison? Like, that's not how that's supposed to work. And with the hospital, when the mom goes to her doctor, I'll just take these drugs. They're fine. He doesn't pay attention to her. So I liked that it did have a lot to say about healthcare. It had a lot to say about mental illness, which I think what you guys were describing before she was taking the pill, she was already showing signs of mental illness.
That's true. That's actually very true. Yeah. And no, I didn't think about that until you mentioned it, that like she was showing signs of like paranoia and anxiety and
stuff
like that.
Like, already, and the drugs
so those pills probably like exacerbated. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. I mean, it's such a crazy story. That's why, like, yeah, you guys are right, definitely on the criticisms of it, but I think there's still a lot here to take away from this movie.
There is.
It does make it important to watch. Maybe like we talk about, don't glorify it, don't talk about how, oh man, that scene where he's shooting into his gangrene arm, like that's what I would hear like a Blockbuster. It's gnarly, man, and it's like, come on, man. Like you don't need to talk about the movie like that. It's not you're not supposed to be like, oh, it's fun. But
right, and Wayne, to your point is, by the time it got to video, it was like someone whose friend knew something about movies told them, and so they and just say not everybody, but they wanted to be cool, so they wanted to get like see Eraserhead and see, Requiem they wanted to see these movies that somebody cool in their mind said it was a cool movie.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But it was before the internet really told you everything, or let you kind of find like-minded people to have movie interest. So it was funny because like later on down the road, somebody's like, "Hey, I really want to borrow that," and I'm like, "I don't." And just knowing the person as in a casual, or say like we all chatted about like JT and I more than movies. We talked more about like music.
Mm-hmm.
Say JT. So like we knew that we had like-minded things out, all of us, different things outside of Monster Jam, as movies or music or whatever, right? Barbecuing, Wayne and I talked about. I still trying to get it down as good as him, but but anyway, my point being is that then I loan my DVD out, and then the person gives it back, and they said I turned it off halfway. It's like I knew you would turn it off halfway because it's not. You don't. I don't want. You wanted to watch it to be cool, and don't watch it to be cool.
Yeah. Well,
like.
Yeah, and I don't like what you're talking about too, because I made a point to Andy yesterday after watching Crimes of the Future. I told him, I'm like, I wish I got to see this movie in theaters so I could see that one guy that was like, oh, Viggo Mortensen's got a new movie out. I like Green Book. I'm going to go see this movie, and be like totally like 5 minutes in, like, what the fuck am I watching? What is this nonsense? Because I love when people do that, especially now in the internet age. You can find anything about any movie and find out what it's about, watch a fucking trailer, but there's still people that will go to the movie theater and be like, oh yeah, the new Viggo Mortensen, let me go see that movie. And just like, oh my God, I can't believe they made that movie. And it's like, it's for a certain sect of people. And Requiem for a Dream is not a movie for everybody.
True.
Maybe my wife would like it, I don't know, but it's like, it'd be one that I would even question showing her. It'd be more, she'd have to like find it on Netflix and watch it and be like, oh, did you see this movie? And I'd be like, oh yeah, I didn't know if you'd like it or not, so we never watched it. But
I'm not dogging too hard either. It's like I'm still glad I watched it, and it's a technical achievement. And Aronofsky is an amazing director.
Yes.
So like, there's lots of reasons to like it. That's for sure. It's just that every once in a while I troll something or like be like,
oh no, for sure.
Like,
I think
I'm one of those people who can like separate style from story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, if one is really bad, you know what I mean? Like I can pick it out, and then like. But if one doesn't matter and the other is the point, you know what I mean? I understand that too. And I think part of it was the style was kind of the point, like too.
So, for sure. It was definitely
from that level, it's really, really good. So
it was a showcase what he could do.
I'm not mad I watched it or rewatched it or whatever, because I think I said I saw it at a party.
Saw it years ago, yeah. Same here.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've only watched it probably like 2 or 3 times.
I appreciate your and Wayne's viewpoint, because it kind of shines a little bit different light. You know what I mean? Like, I think I was so caught up in, I by the end I was already sucked into the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The story
that's
is
how
like,
I was.
And I'm like,
yeah.
Everything kind of already happened by the time the end happens. It was just like exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point.
Yeah,
and I was
and the
like,
music helps too. The music really
the music was. I mean, it is eerie how that Castlevania thing.
I know, right, dude? I was like, "This is from a video game. This is from a video game. What is it? What is it? What is it?" And it finally came to me, and I was like,
"It's
yes.
so." I mean, it's close, right? It's like borrowed or someone. I don't know. It's similar.
Inspired, maybe.
Inspired, yes.
It's Clint Mansell, who's a big.
Probably not, but like, yeah.
Well, Clint Mansell's a big movie scorer dude, so he's done he's done all of Aronofsky's films, and then he's done a bunch of other stuff too. So
it's good. I mean,
he's really good.
All right, well, I
think we're coming to the end here, guys. We're 2 hours 20 minutes. We're going to cut it into parts, but this has been a lot of fun. We appreciate Andy and Scott had to sign off, but we appreciate everybody that joined us today. I think we're going to probably do something like this again in the future, just because it's fun to have all different points of view. Wayne, any final thoughts that you want to end on here?
This was a blast, and I thank everybody for coming and taking the reins and letting me just kind of sit back and throw in my little quips.
Wayne, you're silent but deadly, my friend. That's what I've always said about you.
Hello.
All right, everybody. This has been our 100th episode. Thanks to JT Malloy, Dave Buss, Scott Jordan, Andy Rohr for coming on the show. Wayne and I are very appreciative. Obviously, we know that you guys like to listen when you can. Buss, we know you listen to every episode. So hopefully you'll listen to yourself talk on these 2 episodes. Again, there'll be part 1 and part 2 over the next 2 weeks. Again, everybody, thanks again. This has been another episode of Now Showing with Mike and Wayne.
Reagan, the actor?
Hasta la vista, baby.
Hey, everybody, we're all gonna get laid.